Quake happened at 1 o'clock in the morning, but it was the biggest to hit the UK in a quarter of a century. The epicentre of the quake was near Market Rasen in Lincolnshire. It measured 5.2 on the Richter scale, but the effects were felt from Dumfries and Galloway in Scotland to the Isle of Wight off the south coast, bringing down chimney pots, but thankfully causing no serious injuries. Well, let's cross to Gainsborough in Lincolnshire and join Danny Savage. Danny.
Well, Jane, here in Gainsborough in Lincolnshire, this is a fairly familiar scene. Great big hoist vehicles looking at the roofs of many buildings and inspecting chimneys which were damaged. It was just before 1 o'clock this morning that hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people across Britain were awoken by the earthquake. And they all, it seems, have a story to tell.
Watch carefully and you might just be able to see the earth moving. This is a petrol station in Gloucester, shaken by the tremor. But for an unlucky few, the quake caused damage to their homes. Close to the epicentre in Lincolnshire, the emergency services have spent the morning making buildings safe. And the people of Gainsborough have spent the morning recounting a night they will never forget.
The whole room is shaking and vibrating, there's crashing sounds. Really thought the house was coming down. It was petrifying.
Yeah. I just thought it was either a bad dream or had taken a funny turn. I was actually quite relieved when I found it was an earthquake.
Basically, the bed started shaking, and I woke my boyfriend up, and he nearly fell out of the bed. It's actually broke my bed, so it's the first time the world's ever moved for me.
Piles of rubble now litter this town, along with stories of lucky escapes.
Because the chimney's on the back, it's fell through to the bedroom, it's fell through to the dining room, the carpet's covered with rubble, the back garden, the actual chimney pot's fallen into the back garden.
And listen to this. In one street, a CCTV camera caught the sound of a falling chimney during the quake. And at first light, the chimney's owner recounted what happened.
Certainly scared. You knew something serious was happening, but you didn't quite know what, and I think that was the scary part, really.
Well, most of the incidents throughout the night have been structural related, chimney stacks, chimney pots, gable ends, cracks in walls, and people concerned generally about the safety of their property.
Hundreds of people have contacted the BBC with their accounts and pictures of last night, including the owner of this Hillman Avenger, squashed by bricks in Seaham in County Durham. 4 years of restoration, ruined in a few seconds. But emergency services say it could have been much worse if the quake had struck in daylight.
And that's because a lot of those bricks fell onto pavements or into people's gardens, where they could have been, of course, if it was during daylight hours. So it was a saving grace, really, that it really happened at 1 o'clock in the morning. This quake, stronger than the one in Folkestone last year, but it seems that there is less damage being caused, although those assessments of damage right across Lincolnshire and a wider area as well are still ongoing. Jane.
All right, Danny Savage, thank you. Well, the UK is actually hit by about 200 earthquakes every year, but most of them cause no damage and go largely unnoticed. Our science correspondent, Christine McGurty, has been looking into why we get so many earth tremors.
All we would have seen here was just a solid line.
Here it is on screen, the earthquake as detected by the experts. The measurements show this was a very significant quake, the type that occurs only about once every 30 years in the UK. The data comes from seismometers like this one, dozens of them placed all around the country, detecting the slightest movement in the earth beneath our feet. And these often occur at known faults in the rocks.
These faults act a bit like zones of weakness that allow stress to build up. And eventually the stress builds up until it reaches a point where it exceeds the strength of the rock on either side of the fault, and those rocks then slide past each other, and that's the earthquake.
Experts have produced a map of all the earthquake activity in the UK in recent times, and there is a distinct pattern to it. You can see a band of activity stretching roughly from the Severn estuary northeast towards the Humber. By comparison, the southeast of England is relatively quiet. Today's earthquake is the biggest since one hit North Wales in 1984. Measuring 5.4 on the Richter scale, it too was felt across a wide area, though the damage was limited. 6 years ago, Dudley in the West Midlands was hit by a quake slightly smaller than today's. In fact, about 200 earthquakes hit the UK every year, but only around 25 are strong enough to be felt by humans. Christine McGurty, BBC News.
Well, of course, do keep sending us your pictures of the earthquake. The BBC so far today, I should say, has received more than 26,000 emails. And that is the biggest response in the shortest period of time for the BBC website. So there's the address on the screen. And do keep sending us your experience.